Hello, and welcome to PEP, Passion, Empowerment, and Perseverance. I'm your host, Graham Salinger, founder and president of Salinger Coaching Solutions, where I offer individualized coaching for team leaders, managers, and CEOs and other form of business leaders, as well as group coaching for their teams. For those of you who don't know PEP or you're new to the program, I talk to individuals who have had really successful careers about what has put a PEP in their step, in other words, what's empowered them, and how they have used their work and insight to put a PEP in other people's step, how they've empowered others. And I'm very honored today to be honored by Alyssa Reynoso-Morris. She is the co-founder and CEO of Schools for Sustainability, which operates vocational technical high schools in Philadelphia and the Dominican Republic that focus on teaching and modeling proficiency in organic farming, water remediation, renewable energy, and waste management to alleviate poverty and improve the environment. She's even spoken about this work as a guest speaker at an event sponsored by the United Nations. And as an aside, it is through that work that I actually met Alyssa, because I was fortunate enough to be in graduate school doing some consulting with Schools for Sustainability and helping them come up with a plan, an emergency plan in case there was some sort of emergency in the Dominican Republic and they needed guidance on that. So I was working as a consultant. So that's how I had the honor of working with Schools for Sustainability in that capacity. Among other hats that Alyssa wears beyond Schools for Sustainability is that she's a motivational speaker who focuses on the topics of pinpointing your passion, visualizing and manifesting goals, and storytelling to create community while advocating for change. Alyssa envisions a world where each human being is empowered through education while fostering environmental stewardship. Her personal experience, which includes overcoming homelessness, and her time abroad, which has included interning for a microfinance organization working to break the cycle of poverty in the slums of India, teaching English at an orphanage in Tanzania, and facilitating the establishment of the Women's Witness Protection Program for the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, has clarified her vision. To learn more about Alyssa's work, you can also read some of her writings in the Huffington Post, where she is a contributor. All right, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I love your introduction for the program. And PEP is just such a perfect name for it.
Thank you.
Awesomeness all around.
Great. Yeah, so let's get into the PEP. So, yeah, as I said at the beginning, at Salinger Coaching Solutions, we look at empowerment through sort of three lenses. I look at powering people's and groups' passion, looking at it from a perspective of what is your purpose, and also perseverance, right? The ability to, life happens, there are challenges. I'm coming to you during COVID, so we all know there are challenges beyond just typical business challenges, but in the context of business challenges, not only do you have to have goals and you have to have objectives, you have to have the ability to have agility and perseverance when things get tough, right? And so I want to start our conversation by asking you about your purpose and your passion. So I just read your bio. It was lengthy, and now my guests get to hear from you directly, because I'm doing a lot of talking at the start. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What about your life experience has informed your passion for the environment, education, and poverty reduction?
So I would say it's hard to pinpoint just one instance. And I think a lot of individuals who are figuring out their passion might be able to relate to that. I think it's a beautiful thing when you have multiple experiences confirming the direction that you need to go. And sometimes we ignore those voices, we ignore those signs, we ignore those experiences that are confirming where we're supposed to be going because we have other responsibilities. We need to make money. We have other distractions. We live in a very demanding capitalist society, and there's a lot of expectations put on us. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, being able to identify my passion for the environment and education, it really started when I stopped listening to all of those voices and listen, as cheesy as it may sound, listen more to the voices within. And the experiences where I felt the most like where I belonged, you know? I think one of the first times when I realized I cared about the environment was when it was actually around this time, Christmas time, and it's traditional for most families that celebrate Christmas to, cut down a tree and put it in their house and decorate it. And it's just tradition, and we're excited about it, and we bring some light and nature into our homes. But I remember, I think I was like 7 or 8 and telling my mom, this doesn't feel right. Like, why are we cutting down this tree? And little moments like that, I would go home to the Dominican Republic, which is where my family's from, and I would see how the mountains were being stripped away for mining. Mining is a huge industry in the Dominican Republic, and it's, if you actually see how mining is done, it's very exploitive and, for lack of a better word, ugly, what it does to the beautiful mountainside where my family's from. We're not from the beaches, we're from the more mountain regions. And I remember having a conversation with my grandma. I'm like, what's going on? Like, why is this a thing? And as I, kept growing up, so to speak, I did the things that I was supposed to do. I went to school and I got good grades, and I was just moving through life, doing the things that I was supposed to do. But there was always these moments where I kept being pulled into, well, why do we do this way? Isn't there a better way? Why are we using fossil fuels as our primary source of energy when we can be using other alternatives? And the more that I learned and went to school and learned about solar panels and things like that, the more I was just like, I don't know why we're not doing more of this, and it just got difficult, in a good way, to unsee that. It became almost impossible to not see the possibilities for a more sustainable future, and how personally it was my responsibility to make that happen. So what I do a lot also with my clients is talk to them, like, what are the things when you were little that really grinded your gears? And it sounds like a bizarre tactic, but I think children are very wise, and our younger selves are our true selves in a lot of ways. And now that I'm a mom, I see that even more. So I take a lot of my clients through that experience of really thinking about, what were the questions that you had as a child? What were the things that, you felt gravitated toward, and just, you just wanted to know more about, and you just completely immersed yourself in it, and figure out ways to incorporate those things into your present life. And if it brings you joy again, then maybe that's where you should be. Maybe those are the spaces that you need to spend a little bit more time in. And I'm not advocating quitting your job and, abdicating all responsibility, but maybe there are groups and organizations that you can collaborate with, that you can, volunteer for, even in a limited capacity, just to see and really explore those places of passion. And education was a little bit easier. My mom is a teacher, so I was always surrounded by educators, and I always felt at home in academic settings. There were a lot out of place, but most times when I was sitting in a classroom, and I know that's not everyone's experience, but when I was sitting in a classroom, I felt like I belonged there. And I was very fortunate enough to have professors and teachers before that really were invested in their students. And I had a lot of challenges as an immigrant and as a non-English speaker, so there were many barriers to making, academia a welcoming space. But the professors that I had, most of them were just amazing and really, helped me figure out and navigate those spaces. So yeah, then I just realized I'm like, these two belong together. So focusing on educational models that teach environmental sustainability just seem to make sense more and more.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I hope I know that's a
Yeah,
kind
I
of a
mean,
long
and you
rambling,
you
but
alluded to sort of the way that process for yourself, you also use that with your clients, right? So the what I heard you say is sort of this childlike curiosity from
yes,
like 7 or 8 about like a Christmas tree, right? Led to this um curiosity about why do grown-ups do things that way? And then
right,
now that you are a grown-up, you're thinking, maybe I can talk to grown-ups about why they're doing things the way they are now, right? And
right,
that is about oftentimes when we're in work, we sort of get caught up in the grind and we forget about the
yes,
joy, right? Or we not only you didn't say this specifically, but like our childhood wonder also really guides our values, right? And so
yes,
if we're not happy at work or we don't feel like there's alignment with vision, all of that is related to values. And so what I heard from you is that your passion came from both the influence of your family,
yes,
your context as an immigrant, and going back and seeing the impact, the relationship between environmental degradation and economic
yeah,
issues and poverty. And so that childlike wonder really goes throughout the work that you do, both in terms of schools for sustainability, but also the work that you do with your clients.
absolutely.
Yeah, I do.
You said that so much better than me. I love that. That's a great summary.
Yeah, and so, well, yeah. How do you? I do a lot of
Yeah,
summarizing.
it's one of your
um,
many, many skills.
it's a very specific interview style. Thanks for going with the flow on that. So can you talk about how you went from I mean, lots of people want to be doing things that they're passionate about or that are more in alignment with their values or that go along with sparking curiosity. But
Yeah.
not everyone can start their own school in 2 different countries and become super successful about it. So can you sort of transition to how you went from seeing those issues and being as thoughtful as you were about that to actually creating something substantive?
Yes. So I think the best way to summarize my journey is just doing a lot of research.
Hmm.
I started off by first looking to see if something along the lines of what I was envisioning even existed. Because if something did, instead of reinventing the wheel and starting from scratch, maybe I can collaborate with already existing institution and we can work together. And there is an amazing institution in Tanzania actually, started by in collaboration with the Tanzanian community, started by Australians, called Kesho Leo. It's like today and tomorrow, and it was really cool. So I learned a lot from them. I contacted them, I reached out, we talked a ton. I also researched other institutions like the Omega Center in New York, upstate New York. They have a really cool system called the Eco Machine. And it's just a really cool way of purifying water,
Hmm.
um, using biomimicry. So basically, they create a small ecosystem, and it purifies water using plants and bacteria just like how it would be in nature, and it
Hmm.
it was really amazing to visit. So I first started off by researching other potentially existing models of individuals that are doing similar things to what I wanted to do, organizations whose values align with mine. And I figured out ways that we can maybe help each other and collaborate. And then eventually I knew in my heart that I wanted to bring what I had learned to the Dominican Republic because that's where my family's from. I wanted to give back to that community. So then I collaborated with a former professor at Arcadia, which, you Arcadia alum in the house. And she actually had connections in the Dominican Republic. Also, one of those connections was with the former president of the Dominican Republic. So
Ah.
things just started to move forward in a way that just, it felt like destiny,
Mhm.
and that's kind of what I was trying to allude to in the first question. When you figure out what that childhood wonder is and you start moving toward that direction, whether it's, you work your regular job and then you volunteer 2, 3, 5 hours a week, you'll start to see, when you're in those spaces, confirmation that you're on the right track, that you're on the right path. And
Mhm.
that's what started to happen. I was still working a job, and all of these connections started happening, and it just felt like, okay, this is it, right? I'm onto
Mhm.
something here. Or I'm crazy, or maybe both. And so little by little, I continued to make connections, I continued to do research, and start did the connected with individuals that helped me figure out the paperwork that needs to be done to turn schools for sustainability into nonprofits. So did all the legal stuff, networked with the right people, that had the skill sets that I didn't have at the time. Because I started schools for sustainability when I was 22. So I'm smart and resourceful and scrappy, but there's a lot of things that I didn't know how to do at that age, just because I didn't have the experiences.
Mhm.
So it was really figuring out what my skills are, what I know how to do well, and the deficits. Who are the kinds of people that I need to recruit, so to speak, in order to
Mhm.
get to the goal.
Mhm.
So that's what we did. And we collaborated with other nonprofits like 33 Buckets, where they build water purification systems, and collaborated with Arcadia in order to bring a group of service students to the Dominican Republic. And we built an aquaponics system together. So while the school is not fully done in the Dominican Republic, we did get to complete water purification system and also an aquaponics system. And basically, a little bit of what aquaponics is, it's the marriage between aquaculture and hydroponics. So you can grow crops without soil, which was
Mhm.
needed in that community because the soil had been so depleted of nutrients. So it was a really resourceful way to grow iron rich crops, which the community needed because there was an iron deficiency problem in the community, while also growing fish. So basically the fish provide nutrients for the plants, and then the plants purify the fish tank. So it's this really cool closed loop system that requires very little human intervention once it's actually established. And there was also a huge protein deficiency in the community because protein rich foods are expensive. So we were able to address their iron deficiency needs and their protein deficiency need in one system with one solution. And it was really cool. Obviously, I mean, I can talk about this all day and geek out about
Yeah.
aquaponics. And we did that in collaboration with Arcadia and
Mhm.
a Drexel University student that basically like did his dissertation on aquaponics. So
Mhm.
again, it's really like doing a lot of self-reflection and figuring out like, what am I good at, what am I not, how can I bring people in that know the things I don't know,
Mhm.
so that we can work together to actualize the vision. um,
Mhm.
but yeah, those are
Great.
some some ways to get started.
Yeah.
Once you have that, you think back to that childhood wonder and those things that really bring you joy. Those are some ways to get plugged in. There's a lot
Mhm.
of amazing people doing amazing things, to just really surround yourself in a circle of those amazing people, and things will start happening.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. So when you talk about being scrappy, right? That's a
Yeah.
good overall lesson in general, whether you're starting out or sometimes even if you've been doing it for a long time, that's the best
Yeah.
time to revisit things and go back to the drawing board.
Yes.
Um, as mentioned, coming to in the time of COVID, um, how has School for Sustainability been doing in the age of COVID, and what are some lessons you've learned and ways that actually that maybe even some growth that has happened because of forced scrappiness that's come out of the situation.
Right. So because of everything that's happening with COVID and, you know, restrictions and everything that are keeping us safe, we're not able to continue with the construction. So we're not implementing any new projects.
Mm.
But we are keeping in touch with our local community down there to make sure that everything is still, good. And then also just taking the time to see like where funding is. Because right now, most of the projects that both of the projects that we were able to build was mostly done through charitable contributions. So just really figuring out where the money is, because it's a time when a lot of people in general, and specifically a lot of individuals in our network, are struggling. So really taking the time to be mindful, to see, okay, where are areas for potential opportunity here, because we don't want to keep asking the same individuals in our network that are already being put in a difficult position to keep giving us money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one area that we've been able to spend some time on. And that's kind of how the guest speaking thing came about. There were several organizations and individuals that needed guidance in certain areas, and they were willing to pay for it. So I was like, hey, this is a great way to raise the money.
Okay.
And it also felt very natural, because I like to talk. So I was like, okay, let's give this a go. Let's give this a try. Another area that we are hoping to be able to move forward in is that, because there's a lot of online learning that's happening, we would like to potentially revisit our lesson plans to see how we can have them be like online component for parents that are interested in teaching their kids environmental stewardship. So how can we take these lessons, have them be virtual and accessible for families during COVID? So that's one other area that we're exploring, and I think it would be really cool to be able to do that, because not only will we be able to help the community in the Dominican Republic by really like testing the curriculum, but we'll be able to help anyone who has access to the internet. And there's a lot of really great organizations out there that are making it a point to make internet accessible for low income, communities and low income individuals. So yeah, just figuring out ways to make our services more flexible, adaptable, given the weird situation that is this pandemic. And then also just taking some time to be human and to spend time with my family. I think this is a good opportunity for a lot of the people that they love and that they care about, just in different ways, just checking in on each other, seeing how people are doing, because a lot of individuals are having a hard time and struggling. So just picking up the phone or having a Zoom call with friends, trying to be a source of light is another thing I've been trying to make a priority. And it's brought a lot of light to my life, being able to take some time to just talk to the people that I love and care about and say, hey, how's it going? Just being an empathetic ear has been really, really energizing, because it being of service to other people just energizes me in particular. And I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yeah. So on that note of being in service to others, and that always requires agility, right? Because
Yes.
service of others inherently is about other people's needs, and COVID's creating new needs. That means you got to move to where other people are, right?
Yes.
And so I mentioned at the beginning your sort of your mission or your purpose of envisioning a world where each human being is empowered via education while fostering environmental stewardship. As I mentioned with this Salinger Coaching Solutions, what I do is I work with leaders and teams to empower them to clarify and strengthen their purpose,
Yes.
and look at goal setting and things like that around institutional values, norms, and missions. Sounds like you have a very specific mission. Schools for Sustainability is part of that. How did you come up with sort of the purpose for yourself of envisioning a world where each human being is empowered via education while in fostering environmental stewardship? We spoke a little bit about it at the beginning in terms of your childhood wonder and passion for that. Can you speak specifically about how you sort of came up with that actual sort of vision statement?
Yeah. The more logistical aspect of figuring out what that statement would look like came from researching other mission and vision statements and really seeing how concise and simplistic they are. And I knew that I wanted to focus on education because in my family, education was really important, and it's the spaces that I always felt like I belonged. And then in terms of the environment, it's always been a topic that I cared about and that I taught, kind of like push that back on my family. And it's specifically when it comes to the environmental aspect, in a lot of, I was the only person that looks like me, even though, I mean, the data is out there. I can't quote any off the top of my head right now, but environmental crises affect individuals of lower socioeconomic status the most. When it comes to pollution, there's tons of data to show that there are more pollutants in the air in inner city areas of lower socioeconomic status. What was happening with the pipeline. It's not a coincidence that the pipeline is, they're trying to push it to put it in indigenous communities where individuals are more marginalized. So I knew that was part of it. Had to be a part of my mission, because as a woman of color, as an immigrant, as someone who had to learn to speak English, and someone who was constantly reminded that I don't belong in certain spaces, I knew that other people that look like me needed an ally in the environmental movement. Mm-hmm. So that was another motivator. But ultimately, if I have to really pick one thing, because again, there were a lot of things that confirmed this is the path, this is the trajectory. It was really my grandmother. She always instilled the values of taking care of the environment. And she never she would always have a handkerchief instead of disposable, tissues and little things like that I kind of took for granted, and I just adopted. And it wasn't until I went to school and you see tissues and I'm like, huh, what's that? So I think it was embedded from my grandmother and the way that I grew up, and then it just continued to get confirmed in academic spaces when I did more research that okay, we need, this is important, and specifically for communities of color, we need to be pushing the envelope, because we're oftentimes the ones that are not taken into account when it comes to policy. And oftentimes environmental stewardship is the faces of the individuals that get a platform don't look like me. So I knew that, okay, I need to push the interests of people that look like me as well. Mm-hmm. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, there was not only were we coming to a time of COVID, but it's sort of a reawakening or additional conversations about racial equity.
Yes.
In the United States. And in some ways, actually, that's not unrelated to COVID, because COVID has sort of brought awareness or magnified something that historically we know, right? Marginalized communities, minorities, women and women of color, and other groups, right? Oftentimes are the ones left behind, both in terms of health and financial. And then you're sort of bringing in also this environmental part of it as well. So there's a poverty reduction and equity in terms of relationship to each other. Great.
Yeah.
And so, I have sort of alluded to the way that I look at empowerment through the lens of passion, purpose, and perseverance. And we've sort of gone through a few of those questions so far. In general, can you just speak about how you've been empowered through your life and what lessons that has taught you about best practices for empowering others?
Yeah. In terms of best practices, I think for me, what's been the most effective is making the choice every day to devote my time and energy to my goals. You're always going to have challenges. You're always going to be faced with adversity, people that, sometimes it's in the form of people that don't believe what you're about. Sometimes you're up against corporations and their special interests. Sometimes it's going to be financial resources or the lack thereof. The obstacles are, you know, it's difficult to wrap your head around them because
Yep.
there's just so many of them. Instead of going down that rabbit hole, all of the things that can go wrong, every day I wake up and I write down 3 things that I'm thankful for, which is a practice that I learned from, again, my grandmother. And then I take the time to say, okay, today I'm going to do X, Y, and Z because this is going to bring me closer to what my goals are. Okay,
Mhm.
today this is what we need to do. And then I just, cross them off the list. But ultimately, it's a mindset check
Mhm.
every day, just making sure that my head is in the right space. And if it's not, figuring out what I need to do in order to get in that space. Maybe I need to go for a walk and get some fresh air. Maybe I need some sunshine. Maybe I didn't drink enough water. Maybe I need to hydrate. And really taking care of myself to be able to do what I need to do. So yeah, I highly recommend. Another thing that I do, I have a gratitude jar. So when I write those 3 things, I put it in there. And if I'm having a not so great day or I got some not great news, I go in my little jar and I read something out of there. And it's like, yes, I remember when that happened. Okay, whew, I got this. And it, like reignites, recharges my
Mhm.
batteries.
Mhm.
Everyone's different, but I know that's one thing that has has never steered me down the wrong path.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting you brought that up because I posted during, it was Thanksgiving, and I posted during Thanksgiving. Like, that's also helpful not only for ourselves but also like as a manager to show, especially when there's heightened stress and tension, to
Yes.
create cultures where there's mutual levels of gratitude, because that helps unite the vision and
Yes.
create those cultures where there's trust and people know they have each other's back, because even if stuff's happening and stuff is happening, there's still, we're grateful for each other for bringing our values and our skills and all of that. So I appreciate that input that
Definitely.
you brought to that. As I said, the third thing that I focus on in terms of my empowerment practice is that I use my conflict resolution expertise along with lived experience. And you talked a little bit about lived experiences in terms of your childhood experience and coming as an immigrant and being a woman of color and not speaking English. In terms of my lived experience that I talk openly about on this channel and with other interviews I've had with clients, right, is the fact that I'm a person with disabilities, the fact that I recovered from an eating disorder, the fact that when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, I had to be evacuated because of the war in Eastern Ukraine. And so I sort of use those contexts to help leaders and teams sort of think about perseverance. And,
Yeah.
we face challenges and we face adversity. COVID's one of them, right?
Yeah.
Because that can take a toll on a leader, it can take a toll on a team, it can take a toll on culture, right? And I know that you have faced some adversity in your life. So, what was your perseverance journey like?
That when you sent that question over, I was like, "Ooh, that's a loaded one." Because I don't
Whatever,
think,
to the degree that you're comfortable sharing.
yeah, I think the perseverance journey is ongoing. It never ends. Um, and it's that daily choice to keep going. There's
Mhm.
there's always going to be challenges, and there were times when we didn't have electricity when I was growing up. There were
Mhm.
times we didn't have food. And it was through those moments that I really saw how resourceful my community was. Like my mom, when she was going to school to become a teacher, she had to, like volunteer at a school in order to get her hours in order to get certified. And she's a single mother of three, came to this country not knowing any English, and um, it was seeing how she became friends with the lunch ladies so
Mhm.
that the extra cartons of milk that weren't used that day, instead of getting thrown away, they gave them to her because she was able to connect with them. A lot of the lunch ladies were, Dominican, some of them, or Puerto Rican. She was able to tap into what brought them together, what made them similar, and share little pieces of her and of her experiences and what she's going through. And they were so kind. They were like, "Oh my god, I think it's great that you're going to school and that you're trying to better yourself." And they would always give her, the the extra food that was left over, and she would bring that home,
Mhm.
and I thought that was normal. I was like, yeah, this is where we get our milk. It wasn't until I was older that I picked up on those things. Because when at least for me, when I was growing up, you don't have anything to really like compare it to. So I
Mhm.
didn't really see the inequalities
Mhm.
until I was older. But instead of looking at them as inequalities, being able to identify them and say, moving forward, we need to do better as a society, right?
Mhm.
But then also thinking of like, okay, if my mom was able to do what she was able to get through, I can do anything. And really tapping into, this might sound really crazy, but tapping into that ancestral wisdom. My grandmother, I know I talk about her a lot, but
Hey,
my
I interviewed
grandmother,
my grandma for this show like 3 weeks ago, and it was great.
yes, grandmothers. I love grandmothers. She's no longer like with us, but I always feel her spirit.
Mhm.
And my grandmother, she was my best friend. She was my consultant. She was everything, and she came to this country because of a vicious dictator. And instead of, looking, talking about what a horrible man he was, and how he exploited the Dominican people for 30 plus years, she shared all those things with me, but she also said, okay, so what are we have to vote. She was the reason I became a political science major, because
Mhm.
I knew, she constantly reminded me that voting is a right, but it is also a privilege that can be taken away from us. And I think
Mhm.
this past election has taught us that when we go out and we vote, we can win, not to get too political here, but we came out in droves.
Mhm.
The people were upset that kids are being locked up in cages and separated from their families. People are upset that we are rolling back EPA regulations that keep our water and our air clean. People were pissed that he claimed that Mexico was going to pay for a wall, and our tax dollars are now being allocated to a divisive tactic that's not actually addressing a real problem. People were angry and are angry. And I think, for me growing up, my mom taught me to use tap into that emotion, that anger,
Mhm.
and do something constructive with it.
Right.
So it's a constant reevaluating. There's when I was younger, we didn't always have food, we didn't always have electricity. I got my first job when I was 11. Off the books, like working as like taking care of people's kids, and then officially on paper when I was 15, and always had multiple hustles. Like side hustles are like a thing now. I'm like, what do you mean hot side hustles? I've had 3 jobs since I was like 10, so thinking whenever things get tough, I think about where I used to be, like the things that I had to overcome and the challenges that not only I had to overcome, but my mother had to overcome and my grandmother had to overcome, and the people before me. We talk about very openly in my family. We talk about how people like us that look like me, there were systems put in place so that we don't exist anymore, so that we don't have a voice, so that we can't be here. And it's something that I'm very I wouldn't say excited, but very mindful about teaching my daughter these things. My husband is Jewish, and we're always talking about these issues. So we want to foster these healthy conversations with her of like, so this is what happens in all over the world, and it is your role as a human being to think about yourself and your circle and how you can make your life better, not just for you, but for the people around you. So I mean, I can go on and on about experiences. When I was in high school, I had to live under the subway, like for about 6 until my friends figured out something was weird about my situation, and they welcomed me into their homes. So whenever things get challenging, I think back to those times, and I focus on how my glass is more full now. So I think about that, and then I also think of, okay, so now I have a little extra in my cup. Whose cup is whose cup is depleted? Whose cup needs a little more these days?
Right.
So that's what I do.
Yeah, I mean the sort of the common thread throughout all the questions I asked you is just sort of the impact that relationships have in terms of of building you up in your experience. And so now that you are able to give back in whatever capacity, you try to build those relationships, right? Whether it's the lunch lady giving the milk, or the friends realizing that you're you're living out of the subway. Those relationships are what tie people together and help us out in that kind of work, right?
Yeah.
Great.
We are not, I mean, I think that's one thing that I think it was, I think, the hardest part for me as an immigrant to wrap my brain around in terms of like American culture. Like the focus on the nuclear family to me was very bizarre, because growing up I had tias and tios, aunts, uncles. There's tia hermanas and primo hermanos. Like I had a huge family, and a huge network, and we leaned on each other very, very heavily. Because it really takes a village. So for me, it was always, that was like, I'm happy that I grew up here. The opportunities that I had in order to pursue my education in this country are something that I never take for granted. I consider myself an American, and I am proud to be an American, but there are some cultural things that I'm like, I think I'm gonna keep doing what my Dominican people do. I think I'm gonna, the values of community and collaboration and really leaning on each other. To me, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make the best of both worlds, literally. And I'm I'm going to take the American values that resonate and that apply, and the opportunities and the resources, but I'm also going to continue to foster community and collaboration, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people in my corner. um,
Hmm.
so I think it's important for all of us to have people in our corner, and it it's only the only way that that's possible for you to be able to look over your shoulder and have people cheering you on is if it's symbiotic. You can't always, be taking. You have to fill each other's cups when you need it. There's times that I'm not doing so great and they help me, and vice versa. So
Hmm.
I think if anything, this pandemic is challenging many beyond ourselves. We have to the act of wearing a mask, as someone who wears glasses, it's a little inconvenient because I can
Sure.
never see because my glasses get all fucked up. But I wear it anyways, right? Because I want to protect individuals in my community. I want to
Hmm.
protect the individuals that are immune compromised. I want to protect the individuals that would be more susceptible to this virus. I want to stay home as much as I possibly can, because I want to, again, protect the individuals in my community. And for me, that was a relatively easy thing to do, because that's how I grew up. That's what we do. That's what Dominicans do. We're like,
Hmm.
all right, so what do we need to do? Okay, this is it.
Hmm. Yeah. So speaking of finding ways to positively influence people, right? We've talked mostly about your role in schools for sustainability, and you alluded to, and I talked about in the bio briefly, your speaking engagements.
Mhm.
So one of the ways you've pivoted during COVID is speaking engagements has helped with some fundraising. So I know that your guest topics are pinpointing passion, something
Yeah.
we've talked at length about, manifesting goals, and fostering community through narrative. We just had a long conversation about community.
Yeah.
A lot of those run parallel to the coaching topics that I cover. So I'm
Yes.
wondering if you can talk about the impact you feel like your guest speaking appearances have had on your audience, and what sort of change you seek through sort of guest speaking in terms of the influence you feel that has on folks.
Great question. Thank you. Um, I think guest speaking is a little weird, because you're up and you're talking to people, and they're looking at you as like the person that has the answers. But oftentimes, what I think I try to make a point of doing when I as a guest speaker is making it as interactive as possible, because oftentimes my audience members have the answers. They just need to be reminded of it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they know what their goals are. They just might not realize the tools that they have in order to bring those goals to fruition. Sometimes all it takes is a reminder to look at who you have in your contacts and literally check everyone in your contact and say, oh, so and so is a lawyer. She can, help me write my bylaws for my nonprofit. And that's exactly what I did. I went through everyone in my contact and I said, okay, so what do I need? I need to incorporate schools for sustainability. I have no idea what that looks like. And I went through everyone in my contact list, and I found that you know, me, a girl from the Bronx, from a single family household, from a low socioeconomic status, even I had connections with individuals in the field, and I tapped on their shoulder and I said, hey, this is what I'm trying to do you think you would be able to help me? And I was surprised to see how many people said yes, and it was very encouraging, and it's just so beautiful how many people were really willing to push me forward, when I was able to have a specific ask of them. It's like, you have this skill, I don't. Can you guide me through this process? And it was amazing to see how many people were just ready to go. And if they couldn't do it, for whatever reason, they oftentimes would put me in touch with someone who could, or if they couldn't at that time, they told me, hey, reach out to me in a month from now. I'm really busy right now.
Mhm.
So that those are the types of exercises that I do with during my guest speaking. I don't like to just like sit there and talk. I think that's boring. I try to make them as interactive as possible. So I do a lot of like workshops, and we break off into small groups where we talk, and
Mm.
I do exercises where we talk about like what am I good at? What
Mhm.
are my skills?
Okay.
And even within those small groups, we realize, oh wow, we can help each other.
Mhm.
So and so is good at marketing. So and so is good with technology. So um a lot of what I do through my guest speaking is helping people reconnect, which is what you do as well,
Yep.
doing right now, to really think about what tools they have in their toolkit that they just need to be reminded of.
Mhm.
But then also a lot of it is I think the reason why my clients love me and they come back and they ask me, hey, when's your next one? Or they make the referral to have me speak at another event is because I'm a little weird. I'm loud, and I'm a little eccentric, and I have big hair, and I have a lot of energy. And I
Our
think,
similarities ended at big hair.
yeah.
I was like, oh, and then you said that, and I was like,
You
oh,
have such a great beard,
oh, thank you so much.
it's wonderful. uh, so it's I have a lot of energy, so I build people up, like it's literally like I've had people say it's like your energy is just contagious. Even during COVID, through a screen, people are just like, whoa, she's a lot. I love it. I didn't realize how much I needed that. So I think more of doing little workshops and during my speaking engagements to really help people do the self-reflection, help them figure out that they have a lot of tools at their disposal, and just being a source of energy. I always give them my contact information, and sometimes, after a talk, they'll text me and they say, thank you so much. I went to your talk, and I feel energized, and I say, hey, text me when you're not feeling energized. I got you. So yeah, that I really enjoy it. I think my grandmother, again, grandmother, she was a storyteller. And
Mhm.
growing up, I always remember us sitting at the kitchen, and she always had a story for every situation. And growing up, my mom was like, "Ah, you're just like your abuela, like you're," and I've noticed that, and that's what has helped me move my goals forward. My personality has helped in like how charismatic I am. And it's also just how empathetic I am. Like I
Mhm.
take the time to listen, and people are like, oh, I'm really struggling with this and da da da. I'm like, oh, I have a person for that, you know? And then, you know, I reach out to my person. I say, hey, I met this person. She needs X. Like, can I connect you to? And they're like, yeah. And that's how magic happens. So that's what I do.
Good.
At least that's what I try to do. And I've had clients say I do it well. So I'll take their word for it.
Well, I thank you for sometimes people are protective of their magic sauce. So thank you for sharing your
No,
secret ingredients.
that's the secret. All the secrets exposed.
Yeah, that's secrets exposed. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so you talked about your having gratitude and keeping your gratitude jar and things like that. Um I often just like to ask my guests sort of as just sort of a informal checkout, what gives you hope in today's era? And what do you draw upon that gives you that hope?
That's a great question. There's a lot that's giving me hope right now. I'm a political science major, so sorry. I'm
So was
really
I.
glad that we won this election. I know that our system is fundamentally flawed. Our founding fathers would be saddened that our system has turned into a two-party system. I think there's a lot that we can't accomplish in a two-party system, but I am really glad that 45 is a one-term president and that we have Kamala Harris as the first VP. I can't tell you, when she was giving her speech, seeing my Twitter blew up. Okay, my Twitter, my Instagram blew up of all my friends posting pictures of their little girls looking at Kamala Harris. For the first time, little girls that look like me see someone that looks like them as the vice president of the United States. And it's just all over the world, people were just in awe and excited and energized and happy. And yeah, for me, every day I woke up for the past 4 years, and I know a lot of other people can resonate with this. Every day it was like, what's new? Who else has 45 screwed over? You know, whose livelihood is being threatened today? Who's being called, a loser? Who's being locked up now? Who has to look over their shoulder? And it was just so many communities were just that have historically always been disenfranchised. Let's be honest, by both parties, but just to the level and degree, it was just on a whole nother level. So that's one thing that brings me a lot of joy. Another is my daughter being able to just see her little face. I swear, she's the happiest baby ever. And I know that I'm biased, but anyone who sees like the pictures and the videos that I post, they say the same thing. She's always smiling. She's always happy. She's just a happy baby. And we sing and we read and we dance, and dancing is great. It's dancing makes me happy. The adrenaline and the endorphins, and that it releases in your body. And then after I have a little dancing session with my daughter, I get on the phone with a client, and then so for me, it's just been, again, just like focusing on the things that fill my cup. And just surrounding myself with other individuals that have similar values. So when we have moments of joy, we celebrate together. And when things are just too much, like this, we had to skip Thanksgiving this year, because of COVID. So that was not so great. But instead of thinking about it that way, thinking about, okay, I'm doing the right thing, the best thing to protect my family and my community, and called them, when we ate separately, but together in spirit. So yeah, there's a lot of good things. I think the work that you're doing makes me really hopeful as well, because there are a lot of individuals out there that need these types of resources. They maybe lost sight of why they started what they're doing, and they just need a reminder. Maybe they just need that extra push, and someone else, a soundboard, which oftentimes I think that's what like coaches do, just someone else to be able to talk problems through, and a different perspective. So I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And I think while things are really challenging right now, a lot of really exciting things came out of the recession. And I've seen how so many communities have been resilient and have adapted. So that also gives me a lot of hope. There's a lot that we can focus on of what's going wrong, but I really think as a community we've come together in a beautiful way, and I hope we don't lose sight of it. I hope that when businesses open up again, we're able to check in the way that we have in a very genuine way. Um, so yeah,
All right.
that among a lot of other things is what I'm hopeful for.
Thank you.
My star.
I'm glad I brought a hopeful and peppy person to PEP. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.